Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, I wish to thank you for the opportunity to present my maiden contribution as Minority Leader on this motion that bears my name. Whereas, according to the Public Health Ordinance, Chapter 12, Number 4, regulations made by the Minister under Section 105 and confirmed by the President under Section 167 of the Public Health Ordinance on September 12, 2020, indicates that all non-essential workers shall remain at home until such time as indicated. And whereas the Tobago House of Assembly has adopted similar measures to regulate the workforce, and whereas the divisions and their employees have faced various challenges in their efforts to establish a formal policy, be it resolved that this House mandates the administration to develop a remote workforce management policy to be implemented throughout all the divisions and agencies of the Tobago House of Assembly as a matter of urgency. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, with your permission, I take leave to place on the records of this Honorable House my sincerest gratitude to the Tobago Council of the People's National Movement and the residents of the electoral district of Darrell Spring Wim, whose support ensured that there is an alternative voice represented inside the Assembly chambers and the spirit of democracy is preserved in Tobago. As Minority Leader and a proud member of the oldest political organization in Trinidad and Tobago, the People's National Movement, I give the assurance to you, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, and the people of Tobago, that this Minority Council, of which I lead, will always act in Tobago's best interests at all times. Rest assured, we will not just oppose our colleagues on the majority side for opposing's sake. Quite the contrary. We will approach each issue with a sound mind and a compassionate heart, ensuring that in the final analysis, Tobago issues are resolved to the benefit of every Tobagonian. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, for us in the PNM, and I as Minority Leader, we believe that the policies we discuss in this House must at all times seek to either make the lives of our citizens easier or their circumstances better. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, these are not just vain words aimed at attaining social media likes, but are genuine intentions and are actively demonstrated through the objectives of this motion. Today, the Minority Council is proposing the implementation of a remote workforce management policy within the Tobago House of Assembly to ensure that the various divisions of the Assembly continue to operate effectively while we adjust to the challenges associated with the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, I know that many citizens might not be aware of what exactly is a remote workforce policy. Therefore, please allow me to explain in layman terms the concept of a remote workforce policy. A remote workforce policy, simply put, is an agreement that allows employees to work from home instead of going into an office. It clearly outlines when, how, why, and the circumstances upon which an employee can work from locations other than the office or on a flexible work schedule. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, I am sure we each have our own personal stories of how difficult it has been trying to balance our careers and family life even before the pandemic. Similarly, I'm almost certain that many of us would much rather have the convenience of working from home than having to go through the daily headache of waking up early, yet having to endure frustrating traffic congestions among the many other challenges that comes with working at an office. It was just a couple days ago, I commissioned a non-scientific poll on both my Twitter and Instagram accounts, where respondents were asked to indicate which work arrangement they would much rather prefer. Unsurprisingly, the majority of respondents on both handles indicated they would much rather work from home. However, there were about 35% of the respondents who indicated they preferred the office environment. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, the results of this random poll is instructive, since it clearly suggests that this policy should neither be designed as a one-size-fits-all policy, nor should it be a policy that is cast in stone. Conversely, it is my respectful view that this policy should include a comprehensive manpower audit of the entire labor force of the Assembly, so as to properly evaluate the categories of workers who qualifies to work from home, while at the same time ensuring that the policy is of a voluntary nature. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, a new research by the workspace innovation company, Instant Group, has found that 80% of the workplaces in Germany now have a flexible workforce policy in place. The country has also earlier introduced its Right to Work from Home bill aimed at encouraging more flexibility. The Netherlands is ranked second in this regard, followed by Australia, the United States, and Canada. This data is instructive and therefore confirms that the COVID-19 pandemic has reshaped the workplace throughout the world for some time to come. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, at the level of the central government, I am advised that the Ministry of Planning and Development is currently drafting a work-from-home policy for both the civil and the public service. However, I wish to respectfully submit for the consideration of this honorable chamber that rather than wait on the national policy, this is an opportune time for the administration of the Tobago House of Assembly to develop its own remote workforce policy, specifically designed to meet and treat with the peculiar challenges of the Tobago House of Assembly's workforce at this time. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, I am quite aware that such a policy will face various political, environmental, social, technological, and legal impediments that will make its implementation quite challenging across divisions. However, the more the challenging times we face, the greater is the need for courageous, insightful, diligent, and decisive leadership, which should inspire hope and provide direction during unpredictable and unprecedented times like these. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, I do accept as quite reasonable someone perhaps thinking out loud as to why the former administrations of the PNM did not develop such a policy before now. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, with your permission, please allow me an opportunity to place the situation into its rightful context. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, you may recall that prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, work from home in the Tobago House of Assembly was being considered as part of a wider national response to concerns over loss of productivity, work-life balance, and workers' health and wellness, among other challenges at that time. However, while these consultations and considerations were happening, the deadly COVID-19 virus crept upon us all, and the Tobago House of Assembly, guided by the public health policies of the central government, was compelled to act and respond instantaneously. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, You may also recall that on the onset of the first wave of infections detected in this country, the government immediately announced the closure of all places of learning, including daycares, schools, universities, and the subsequent implementation of online learning across the education curriculum. The former Tobago House of Assembly administration, in keeping with the public health coronavirus regulations of 2020, dated March 28, 2020, acted swiftly and responsibly by ensuring that all non-essential workers stayed at home during the peak of the first wave of infections in 2020. Additionally, during the peak of the second wave of infections in April of 2021, the Tobago public service workforce was reduced to 50% capacity as per Chief Administrator's Circular Memorandum dated April 21st, 2021. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, you may also recall the closure of the accounting units across the Assembly as staff tested positive for the virus, which in many instances led to delays in payments of salaries and outstanding bills to service providers and contractors. To address this challenge within the public service, the former administration encouraged administrators to implement remote work and flexi-time on a discretionary basis and as they consider necessary for the efficient conduct of public business. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, it will therefore be quite irresponsible and disingenuous if any of my colleagues were to attempt to insinuate that no actions were taken by the former administration to facilitate employees working from home during the pandemic. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, at this time, permit me to turn my attention to the numerous benefits to be derived by the Assembly in developing a remote workforce policy. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, this remote workforce policy has great economic potential since it can realize significant areas of cost savings for the Assembly and the workers well, while at the same time earn large sums of revenue for the Tobago House of Assembly. Let me share with you, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, some of the ways that the Assembly can realize cost savings as follows. A work-from-home policy will significantly reduce the demand for office space and thereby reducing the Assembly's expenditure on the rental of properties to house divisions and units across the Assembly. A work-from-home policy will shift the operations of the Assembly from a paper-based system to a more paperless, digitized system, thereby once again reducing the amount of money spent on the procurement of stationery. Thirdly, a work-from-home policy will also reduce the need to outfit spaces with FF&E, such as office desk, executive chairs, and other office supplies, thereby again reducing the Assembly's annual expenditure on minor equipment purchases. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, employees whose category of work qualifies them to work from home will enjoy some immediate cost savings as well. I take this opportunity to share the example of a friend of mine who works as a BOA 1 at the Division of Settlements in the Far West at Crown Point. But however, that individual has to travel on a daily basis to work from the Deep East. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, I am told by that officer that their monthly expenditure to cover transport, food, and other work-related activities is usually upwards of $2,500, which really represents about 50% of the employee's income. However, when this same employee was allowed to work from home during the stay-at-home ordinance, they were able to save almost the equivalent of that $2,500 and were able to use that savings for other purchases and other requirements. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, there are numerous examples I can share in how such a policy can significantly reduce the income of the Assembly. But to do so, it might just have to include an invoice to my good friend and the Honorable Chief Secretary from Speyside, Lands for Me, Palo TV. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, on a more serious note, this policy can really generate significant revenue for the Assembly. And permit me to share some of the ways in which such revenue can be realized. The investment in digitization and technology will play a critical role in the successful implementation of a work from home policy. Therefore, the Tobago House of Assembly must be prepared to make that initial investment in developing an island-wide ICT data connectivity plan. Deputy Presiding Officer, such an investment will earn the Assembly long-term financial and productive returns. Accordingly, I am aware that the previous administration, through the Tobago Information and Technology Limited Company, commenced a partnership with Huawei to develop Tobago as a smart island. The development of this ICT data connectivity platform can earn revenue for Tobago by allowing free access only to special categories of residents and charging a small fee to other users for data access and usage. This single initiative can generate significant revenue and foreign exchange for the island in any one financial year. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, we do not have to reinvent the wheel since there are proven models that we can adopt from countries like the USA, where broadband suppliers such as AT&T and Xfinity provide data access to customers at varying rates. Another example, Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, where we can generate serious revenue is through tourism. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is no secret that the tourism in the 21st century has evolved simply beyond the offering of sun, sand, and sea. However, island-based destinations are now seeking to attract tourists who work and study independently from their laptops, known as digital nomads. These types of tourists are known as digital nomads, and what is particularly interesting about them is that they tend to stay in a destination for a long period of time. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, in the Caribbean, Barbados is already going after this type of business with a program called Welcome Stamp, and that was launched last year, July. And Barbados is closely followed by Bermuda, who also in last year of August launched its one-year work program, which allows non-Bermudans to relocate their home and office to the 21 square mile island for research study or remote work. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is my belief that the development of a reliable ICT data connectivity infrastructure, coupled with the launch of a remote work visa program, will propel and position Tobago as a very attractive tourism destination for digital nomad type tourists and so help to boost our international tourism arrivals and earn much needed foreign exchange revenue for the island of Tobago and our tourism stakeholders. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, another important benefit to be derived from an effective performance monitoring and management-based work-from-home policy is improvement in productivity. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, information obtained from the Ministry of Planning via the Central Statistical Office has reported that during the second quarter of 2020, productivity increased by 2.2% over the first quarter, while the third quarter of 2020, productivity increased by 0.5% over the second quarter. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, if we can achieve such increase in productivity without having a formal workforce policy, just imagine what can be achieved in addressing our productivity challenges here in Tobago if such a policy was to be implemented with the requisite performance management, ICT, and HR support systems. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, another benefit of this work-from-home policy is that it would force the Tobago House of Assembly to develop an effective performance management and appraisal system. Currently, employees' productivity is simply measured by one's presence at work. When we all know there are employees who show up early to work every day and do very little. And on the other hand, there are employees who may arrive to work very late, but they do quite a lot. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is therefore my respectful view that such an approach of appraising employees is quite archaic, and therefore a formal work-from-home policy will indeed accelerate the Assembly's investment in modern performance measurement software and tools that align tasks to measurable objectives and outcomes. This will in the first instance ensure accountability, responsibility, and also increase productivity across the Assembly. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, more than any other benefit such a policy will bring, this policy will boost the health and wellness of not just the employees, but the family as a whole. Such a policy will afford families an opportunity to better balance work life and family life, as those employees who qualify to work from home will have the opportunity to spend more quality time together with their family. One of my pet peeves with the current structure of the Assembly is that too many persons are straddled into the office settings, when the truth of the matter is there are many positions in the Assembly where employees can easily work from home. I'm sure even our administrators will love to know that there is a digital system that would allow e-approvals and e-filing of data, and which would allow them even to operate from the comfort of their homes and in the presence of family, as opposed to having to go to work very early at sunrise and oftentimes leave work very late after the sun sets. I am sure even for the single mothers, single parents, without a guardian to oversee the online work of their sons or daughters, that these individuals too will happily embrace the luxury of working from home and having that comfort that their child is properly cared for in their home spaces. Madam Presiding Officer, allowing persons to work from home will bring a level of peace of mind for your employees. And this in turn will allow them to function more effectively and efficiently as well. Because oftentimes employees would tell you that being in the office setting sometimes causes unnecessary distractions. They are distracted in many ways, having to attend to other duties, when if they are in the comfort of their homes, they may just be allowed to perform their functions more dutifully and diligently. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, our work from home policy also has the potential to create employment as well. Since once the THA adopts this digitized platform and embraces the importance of having a standalone ICT, perhaps division or unit, this in itself will create employment opportunities for sons and daughters who would have trained in areas of digitization, information technology, and other related services. Additionally, the very cost-saving benefits that will be accrued from the reduction in rental property, purchase of stationery, minor equipments, even food. Because when you have meetings and you have all these employees in the workplace, once they, in some situations, if the meeting goes over to lunchtime, employees have to be fed. So all these cost savings will allow the THA to find other areas where we can perhaps explore productive and progressive situations to employ more of our Tobagonian sons and daughters. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, as mentioned earlier, there are many hurdles that the Assembly will have to overcome in developing such a policy. As we all know that public servants are tied to terms of engagement through their collective bargaining agreements and arrangements, and therefore, the Tobago House of Assembly will have to seek to get the buy-in from the various trade unions. Additionally, we know that both the public service and the civil service are regulated by legislation, which stipulates hours of work. So this in itself will also present a challenge, and would probably perhaps require legislative intervention. But in the interim, as an assembly and as an administration, it is important that whatever parameters are allowed within the civil service and the public service, we pursue it to the good of ensuring that we can have a formalized workforce policy. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, notwithstanding some of these challenges identified, it is my fervent conviction that the benefits of developing a remote workforce policy to govern work from home and the flexi-work schedule of employees across the divisions of the Assembly significantly outweighs any unforeseen challenges. Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is in this context I again encourage this Honorable House that we mandate the administration to develop a remote workforce management policy to be implemented throughout all the divisions and agencies of the Tobago House of Assembly as a matter of urgency. And Mr. Deputy Presiding Officer, With these concluding thoughts and position of this motion, I do so beg to move. Thank you.